everyone, and welcome to my review of The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima. This was a group read for Readers Inc., a Goodreads book club, and I'll be leaving all the information for that down below. And since this is a Japanese novel, this is also part of my Japanese Madness series. The original Japanese title of this book is Gogo no Eiko, and I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly. Those are kanjis that I haven't actually studied yet. And it would translate as Afternoon of Towing or The Afternoon Towing. The book was published originally in Japan in 1963 and was translated into English for the first time in 1965. This particular edition that I have is the 1994 edition from Vintage International, and it is translated by John Nathan. Essentially, the book follows two main characters. The first one is Ryuji, who is a sailor, and the second one is Noboru, who is a 13-year-old boy, and they are connected through Noboru's mother, who becomes Ryuji's love interest in the Yokohama harbor where his ship pulls in for a short period of time. Ryuji and Noboru are both very alienated from society. Ryuji in a more passive way and Noboru in a more active way. Ryuji is a sailor essentially because he doesn't feel like he belongs on land and he doesn't want to be part of society and conform to everything that society asks of him to conform to. And Noboru is a 13-year-old teen who is fighting maturity and who starts glorifying and idolizing Ryuji because of his life choices, because of seeking a different kind of life, of being out on the sea, of not conforming to society. And Ryuji starts developing a love interest for Noboru's mother, who is called Fusako. She has been widowed for 5 years and she has been raising Noboru by herself, and she owns a business, and she also starts becoming interested in Ryuji, and they start having a love affair. While at first, when seeing the sailor, Noboru really starts worshipping him and idolizing him, the more he gets to know him as a person, and the more that Ryuji becomes more of a real person, not just this ideal, and the more he starts to conform more to society because he wants to develop a relationship with Fusako, Noboru starts despising him. This book is a very short book. It only has 181 pages, so it's a very short book, but it is packed with themes and symbols, and it is really amazing what Mishima was able to accomplish in such a short piece of work. The writing, to begin with, I thought it was very beautiful, very poetic, very lyrical, and of course there is something lost in the translation. There's always something lost in translation, but I thought that the translation of this book worked very well. It flowed well. The only problem that I had, and it actually started becoming annoying at times, was that there were quite a few typos and spelling mistakes in this particular edition, and I really think that is unacceptable for such a short book. There's really not an excuse for not proofreading such a short book. That really has nothing to do with the book itself, just this particular edition. The book is divided in two parts, summer and winter, and you can definitely see a shift in how lyrical and poetic the writing is in the first part to more blunt and non-poetic in the second part. In the first part, Ryuji is a glorified idol, whilst in the second part he's starting to become more hated, and there's not this aura of mysticism around him anymore, and you could see that in the writing itself. There's a lot of themes and symbols in this book, and to understand what Mishima was trying to convey, I think it is important to look at his life and at his ideologies. Usually I don't really read up on authors when I read their works, especially not before I read their works, because I don't want to let my perception of them as a person influence how I read their books. But seeing as this was part of a book club, there were a few articles shared about his life, and I do think that it helped understand this book better, because the characters of these books actually have a pretty strict symbolism attached to them, and there's a lot of Mishima's ideology that is transmitted in this book. The book is set after World War II in Japan, and Mishima was a person who believed in the traditional style of the Japanese, the samurai way of the Japanese, and he really despised what Japan became after World War II, when their constitution forbade having an army and going to war. And he really despised that. In the traditional Japanese views and Mishima's views, glory in death for your country is immense. Like, that is the best way to die, by having a glorious death. And that's what Mishima believed, at least from what I understood by reading a bit about him and watching a few speeches of his. This is similar to what Ryuji is in the beginning of the book. He is seeking a glorious death, and he is rejecting the values of society. His views start faltering when he meets Fusako, who is the owner of a store that imports Western goods. Her house is very westernized. She only follows Japanese traditions on New Year's Eve, and she is the symbol of westernization. And by wanting to be close to Fusako and trying to have a life with her, Ryuji gives up his sailor's clothes, starts wearing Western suits, starts going to the store and trying to learn the trade and working with customers. And that's seen as accepting Western values in your life. And for that, Ryuji is despised by Noboru, whose principles and his friends' principles are very strictly in line with traditional old ways in Japan. They performed brutal and cruel acts in the book, and that is a sort of a parallel to what Japanese soldiers did in war before losing in World War II, and they realized that after a certain age they can't do that anymore. And I think that's a parallel to how Japan couldn't do that anymore after World War II. In terms of themes, I think there's a lot of themes in this book as well. There's obviously the theme of alienation, how Noboru and Ryuji are alienated from society. There's the theme of masculinity all throughout, which again falls in line with Mishima's ideologies. Masculinity is romanticized throughout the book. Noboru idolizes Ryuji because he is seen as a real man for leaving Fusako behind, for going out and seeking adventures on the sea and leaving the woman behind. Whenever he does things or says silly things that are not in line with what a real man, a very masculine man would be, Noboru starts despising Ryuji and considers his words or his actions as crimes against him. I think it is incredible how many themes and symbols were able to exist in this little book. That's pretty much all I have to say as a sort of analysis on the book. Even though I outwardly disagree with Mishima's ideologies and the ideas in this book, I still think it's very interesting to read it, and I'm really intrigued by him as a person, and I am really curious to read more about him. I heard that Patriotism is a better book at explaining his views and putting it out there than this book is, so I'm really curious to check that out as well. All in all, I did enjoy this book. I can't say I loved it, but it was a very interesting book, and I definitely recommend it. I will definitely be picking up more by Mishima and let you know what I think about his other work as well. Let me know down below if you've read this. If you are a part of Readers Inc., feel free to let me know if you're making a video about this. That was it for my review of The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you back with a new video soon. Have a great day. Bye.